Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people of society? And I have made it on my own in this world. Will nothing take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Welcome everybody. This is the last show before for Christmas, before the break. I was apologising to the team because I am just knackered. It may show in the way I run the show today. And I have no right to be because I'm retired, and all these people have got responsibilities and the responsibilities on top of responsibilities and the families, and I just sit around getting exhausted. Welcome to those people who are joining to us, Colin and Carl. You're writing at the beginning. I know Barbara's watching on her iPad. If anybody else is there, hello. I think now we can let's start. And what a week, and not just a week for people like Boris, so a week for the team. You've no idea the moments of the weeks they have. Let's just ask them. Let's start with Samantha, who has had the week to die for. It's been a good week for Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hello. Yes, I have had a busy week, so much so that I had to ask John what he thought my moment of the week was, because I couldn't pick one. But yes, my moment of the week is this. I was contacted by a lady. I won't give any details because, you know, GDPR and everything, but I was contacted by a lady. And as I started to talk to her, to ask me to do something counselish, counsely, caseworky, and as I started to talk to her, it became apparent that the reason she had my phone number is because the MP's office actually told her to contact me. And they actually said to her, oh, we can't help you with that issue. Contact Samantha, and she will. And even worse than that, the lady actually contacted them a couple of weeks ago, and they said, oh, we can't help you at the moment because we're really overwhelmed with all of the storm and all the casework that's provided. So, I mean, absolutely happy to do the MP's job. If she would like to resign, we can have an election next month.
And do you not find, speaking seriously, that sometimes councillors are much more aware of how to get things sorted on the ground than MPs? MPs can send letters, I found, but sort of councillors, you know who to go and talk to get things sorted.
Sure. I mean, not to use the terminology of the day, but I do have a plan A, plan B, and plan C for this lady. So hopefully we'll get her sorted. But pretty shameful that people who are paid a significant amount more than me, and that's just not the MP, that'll be her staff as well, couldn't even do that. Bit of a shame.
Have an office of staff whose job is to run around after constituents. But you had other things as well. Yeah, so you had a lot of money for your locomotion museum, haven't you?
We that was part of the levelling up bid. Yeah, we've got, is it 2 million, something like that? Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's plenty, and it's going to create our second building, which will make us the biggest collection of railway buildings in Europe and possibly the world. So that is very exciting. And all we had to do was let Rishi Sunak come and do some photos the other day to earn it. So there we go.
Choo choo. That has been coming for some time. However, I wondered whether that was a Conservative government fraud. That this I mean, they were talking about this shed 3-4 years ago, and it was all planned. It's all, is it not part of the Science Museum's expansion plans? Is this one of these things where the government wanders in and re-gives money that it's given before and claims credit, or is this extra money on top of what was available?
I think this is very much one of those projects that the money would have been found one way or another, and it's handy that the Levelling Up Fund would cover it. There are big questions about whether building a second building at the museum will level up Shildon without restaurants, hotels, and the infrastructure to keep people in Shildon so they spend their money. Obviously, what I don't want is people going to locomotion during the day, going to Kinron on the night, and then spending a week in Durham City.
Or going back home. That's the problem. They don't even stay in Durham.
Yeah.
We need to get people staying overnight in Durham. But you've had some other things. Did you see somebody saying that you were the only Labour person in Bishop Auckland who was capable of taking on Dehenna? I mean, I would have just sort of been putting that on my CV. Sort of.
I think Stuart said that, and I'm very grateful for his confidence.
Little bit of mutual back scratching. There you go. Anyway, well done to you. A great week for you. So, are you ready for Christmas?
No. It'll happen though.
From your background, it appears it. Paul seems very much more ready for Christmas than you are. Moment of the week, Paul.
You're muted, Paul.
But yeah, Jane, you'll have to do
Hello.
two today, Jane. There'll
What-
have to be Paul's flunking out. You'll have to have 2 moments of the week to keep the show going. Tell us one of them.
Well, I was going to have a really happy one because I found out that Starbucks workers in the US, I think in Buffalo, have managed to unionize despite great pressure from above not to do so. They're the first ever Starbucks branch to unionize, which is fantastic. But then, on a less happy note, I did actually want to be a little bit greedy and bring in a second moment of the week, because then I found out today that workers for a very, very large distribution company and another company that makes luxury candles, apparently when the tornadoes happened in America, the warnings were going off and workers were asking to be allowed to go home to their families and to safety, and they were told they'd lose their jobs, so they had to stay at work, and the candle factory collapsed and people have died. Workers at the large distribution company that we're all well aware of in this country died as well. And I think, I mean, it's so important to have the unions, isn't it, to fight for the workers' rights for safety at work. So it put a real shadow on it, but it's really good Starbucks have managed to do that. Those Starbucks workers.
I think, do you think that, I mean, sort of looking back on history, the working class effort had gone sort of one time into unionization, another time into political activism, and it sort of rocks backwards and forwards between the two, depending on the state of the economy very often. And do you feel that it has never been more important that workers unionize and get themselves organized in the workplace? In fact, much more than on the political side of things, where sort of the activity and the energy seems to be receding.
Absolutely, yeah, it's so important in this gig economy world where there are so many workers now in insecure positions. I know that's something we're going to talk about in more detail later, but if we wait for a political party to make it all right in any country, it's not going to happen fast enough. People are actually dying from health and safety incidents. People are living in poverty. We can't wait. It needs to happen now.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your two.
I'm
Paul,
fixed now, by the way.
Yeah, are you with us now?
Yeah, I'm fixed.
Quickly, what was your moment of the week
Okay,
again?
my moment of the week was with the votes today.
I know what it's going to be, people.
Yeah.
It's what it is. It's a goodie. Sorry, Paul.
So it's the votes today in the Houses of Parliament, and I'm going to comment a little bit on the tactics of the Labour Party, which are a bit weird. It was something Jeremy Corbyn was heavily criticised for. Even when he won and defeated the government, he was criticised tactically. Today you had 100 Tory rebels voting against the vaccine passports. The idea of the vaccine passport is that you've got to either show that you've been double vaccinated or that you've had a lateral flow test. But actually, if you don't have an NHS number, you can't have one of these. So it excludes quite a few vulnerable people from doing quite a lot of things. Something that hasn't been thought of. And also, do we really want to give this kind of quite right-wing authoritarian government more authority? It's a really interesting question. I personally would have voted against the idea of having to show a pass. I don't think it's a good way to go. But the Labour Party voted to support the government, which is really interesting. And the Labour Party showed more unanimous support. A greater percentage of support, a greater percentage of their MPs supported the government than the Tory MPs. And it's one of those things, like, the other thing would be, even if you agreed with it, would you not want some concessions? Would you not want them to reinstate furlough? Would you not want them to put the £20 universal credit uplift in there as well? Is this sensible leadership where you just govern it and just saying, yes, we'll support the government, we'll bail you out, when the government could have been in real trouble here? And this could have been the thing that toppled Boris Johnson. So, tactically, it was a bad idea. But, you know...
There's nothing on this, Paul, where basically Starmer had thought about that, but the leadership had rejected it because they thought it would draw hostility. They would be seen to be sort of a bit sort of manipulative if they offered support in terms for concessions and for changes, and particularly toughening up the changes. You're saying that was a mistake to not do that.
It's a huge mistake from whichever angle you look at it, as far as I'm concerned. There's a school of thought within the Labour Party that says that oppositions win when they oppose the government when they support the government 78% of the time. So they've got this strategy where they say, actually, if we support them quite a lot, that means we'll get in next time. So that's a manipulative thing to do. It's a really, really weird tactic. It's just funny because you would have seen, like, if this mistake had been made under Jeremy Corbyn, the centrist press would have been all over this. He would have been a disaster. He would have been a failure. He would have failed to have taken advantage of the situation. He would have been tactically inept. He would have been like no kind of leader. But then when he did do this, when he did defeat the government, they were saying you're just opposing for opposing's sake. I don't. Again, we're back to the what's the point in power without principles, or what's the point in principles without power? And we would always go for the first one there. What's the point in power without principles? But that doesn't seem to be the direction of the party at the moment.
God bless you, Paul. Thank you so much for that moment of the week, and insightful comment about the Labour Party. Stuart,
right,
your moment of the week.
As everybody knows, I'm a political small fry, so it's going to be a town council based one. Today I would have been sat in a couple of committee meetings. They were cancelled because of the coronavirus restrictions and advice that had come forward to the council. And once again, we found that we had zero capacity to do anything online because the government never reinstated our capacity to conduct meetings via Zoom, which you think would have been standard practice at this point. There was no plan B for us. We had nowhere to go. And we'll once again be waiting on the Tory government to give us the very simple mechanisms to allow us to conduct business once again.
I mean, seems typical, doesn't it, that they're sort of asking people to voluntarily lock down. But as Paul has pointed out, they're not providing any of the mechanisms which allow people to do so.
It's disappointing because we had it and then they took it away from us. And there's no sense in taking away something that only benefited people, that only made things easier in a difficult situation. It made things so much harder when you've got to be flexible with the kind of lockdown situation we're going to be having. That flexibility would mean so much, save so much money and protect so many people in local government by being there.
I mean, Great Aycliffe Town Council, which for people listening in from the Philippines and places like that, it's a little town council next door to Chiltern, where Stuart comes from. But I mean, they had actually hybrid meetings where you could actually go into the offices and take part, or you could join in from home. And it struck us at the time that this was not only a model for the lockdown, but actually it would allow a whole load of people to participate in council meetings, young mothers, people who had caring responsibilities, people who had sort of a job where they actually couldn't get at that time to the meetings, could perhaps sign on online. And it struck us as a great way forward. I have no idea why they decided that they couldn't continue with online meetings if they wished. So, I mean, has anybody got any idea of the thinking behind stopping us doing it?
All I could suggest is that Westminster thinks working from home is lazy.
I think they're worried about like people who can't access the meetings at the moment, like say people with childcare commitments and things like that. They want it to be a difficult thing to get into. they've had to struggle through these things. They think other people should also have to struggle through these things, so they won't make it any easier. So these things that would have made it better for disabled people, for people who have to work, and maybe they are people who work shifts, or all these different people who they really don't want to be fraternising with. I think that's what it's for.
I mean, I think there's very much a case of the political establishment seems to be closing in and getting much more talk about the need to work together. And so, you know, party doesn't matter. We all get together and cooperate with each other and keep it in the house. And sort of, it's not as populist as it was, certainly under Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen an exclusion of ordinary people and ordinary people's ideas. Maybe that's it. Thank you, people. Fabulous moments of the week. I did want somebody to bring up the Stephen Port failures. I don't know whether anybody wants to comment on the chat stream, but I mean, the failure of the Met to stop those young men being killed, and it brings up all this eye, and we won't have a chance to discuss it because there's nothing now until the new year. And is the Met institutionally homophobic as well as institutionally racist? And is there any continued role for Cressida Dick? It would have been so lovely to talk about that today. I suppose that's my moment of the week. Right, Paul, let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story today you have chosen is Julian Assange, which is a really kind of strange choice. And thank you for choosing something that just wasn't the big story of the week. We were complaining about that as a team last week. And so, Jane, I think some of our listeners won't have a clue what the whole thing is about. Can you just sort of explain the whole thing to us from the very beginning and treat us as treat me like the ignoramus I am?
So to go back to what I'd say is the very beginning would be when Julian Assange, when he was working with WikiLeaks, got hold of and released to the public information and evidence of terrible human rights abuses committed by the US government, aided by other governments around the world. That led to them seeking to arrest Julian Assange, and he obviously spent lots of years in seeking sanctuary in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. But for the last 3 years now, I think he's been in Belmarsh high security prison. And the US are trying to extradite him. And if he's taken to America, he will potentially face 175 years sentence in a high security prison. And the courts in this country earlier on this year had heard the case and had judged that there was a serious risk to Julian's life if he is extradited to the US, that he would be very likely to commit suicide, that his health has already been severely impacted by what's happened over the last, I don't know how many years now. It came back to the High Court last week, and the High Court judged that although they did accept the conclusions of the lower court, which did include all the medical evidence and the assumption that measures that might be imposed on him in America could well lead to his death or suicide, they've decided that he can be extradited to America. And I'm not very coherent talking about it, actually, because when I found out, I was shaky. I was so angry and upset because this is a terrible injustice for this man. He's exposed human rights abuses. He's being punished for it. To shut him up and to make sure that no one else has the audacity to do that again. But very frightening for all of us, because the implications, what's already been done to him is terrifying. But if he is taken to America, and it just terrifies me at what has happened to our, what's supposed to be our democracy and freedom of speech. it's an awful situation for us all. We should all be very frightened and very angry, and we should all be shouting from the rooftops that they cannot take him to America and that he should not be in prison. He should be freed.
I'm going to ask you some what might be regarded as hostile questions here, but and just see what you think about these. I mean, the first one is that what about all those rape charges? I mean, at the end of the day, he wasn't proved innocent of those charges. They just basically, the Swedish government just ran out of puff and eventually just dropped them, much to the anger of the main protagonist, so the main accuser. I mean, is there not a sense in which he's been fleeing justice, not a victim of injustice?
No, I don't feel there is. I mean, if those charges were open, then that would be a different question as to whether he should be extradited to Sweden, if that would be appropriate to be tried, or whether he should be tried for those charges. But those charges don't stand, and I would say there must be a good reason why those charges don't stand anymore. And you can't just assume someone's guilty of one crime that they've not been tried for and say because of that you're, treat them unfairly over something else. It needs to be a fair trial.
And not has he actually been charged?
He has.
At one point, he was complaining it was 7 years and he hadn't been charged.
I don't think he has been charged with anything. He'll face charges if he is extradited, is my understanding. But I don't know if anyone else has a better legal understanding than that here. And
I mean, my second hostile question, Jane, would be sort of, if I stand for something, I don't know, women's rights, and I go and I chuck a brick through some government window, I've stood up for what was right. I've been the whistleblower on it, but I expect then to be punished for criminal damage. And sort of, is there not, and I've asked this before about whistleblowers and people like Julian Assange, is there not a sense that when they did it, they should have been prepared for the fact that there would be a response on this, and that the cost to them of doing right would be that the establishment would then charge them with whatever they could charge them with? Is the sense, and the prosecution argued successfully as it was that to let Julian Assange just walk free in a way was rewarding someone for fleeing justice? What would your response be to that?
I'd want to know what justice it is that he is fleeing, because I'd say he's fleeing persecution. I'd say that if I brutally murdered a group of people just for the fun of it, and you saw me do it and you spoke up about it, if I had a lot of influence or money, that shouldn't mean that you should be fearful to speak up and think, oh no, she's very important, I better not say anything, it's okay that she did that. And if we impose that kind of logic going through history at the atrocities that have happened through the years, to turn a blind eye to evil acts of murder and torture because the people who've done it are powerful, it doesn't bear thinking about where we'd be now.
I've just got one last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for your such cogent answers and your great knowledge on this. But my third question is this: that Julian Assange has done nothing to us at all. Sweden have pestered us to try and extradite him, and we've decided that we're not going to do it. The USA have pestered us to extradite him, and until very, very recently, just this last month, we've decided that we're not going to do that. And yet he's in Belmarsh prison. And sort of, is the United Kingdom guilty of what do you call it when you cooperate with the enemy? Sort of with the establishment, to actually deny this man his human rights? Should he not have been put out on bail? Are we conniving,
collusion?
Colluding, there's the word, thank you, God bless you, Paul, with the establishment and with the people who did those evil things that he shone a light on, to actually imprison him in our own country, totally injustice? Should he not have been out on bail, at least?
Absolutely.
I mean, are we culpable, Jane?
We're absolutely culpable, and I won't go on too long, but this man hasn't just been sitting in a prison cell like you might imagine. This man's been in solitary confinement. He's not even been allowed access to his legal team on a lot of occasions. He's not been allowed access to any sort of computer or notebooks or anything so that he can prepare his legal case. He's not had access to people who've wanted to see him, prominent politicians. He's not had access to his family and friends. Very, very restricted, and it's terrible what we've done to him.
So I agree, actually, Jane.
I thought you might.
But I mean, what can we do now, Jane? What do you want people who are listening into this to do?
So they're going to, Stella Morris, his partner, and his legal team are going to appeal the decision. And I think if people write to MPs, try to get letters in the newspaper, make a fuss on social media, as much noise as possible, so that they know they can't just sweep this under the carpet and whisk him away to America. Let them know that we care.
God bless you, Jane. Paul, you wanted Jane to lead on that question, because you said that she was so good on it. And have you anything to add, is what I would say, about this issue?
Yeah, mine's more about the case in general rather than the British involvement in this, because the British involvement in this is because he's here, basically, because he's in this country and he was in the Ecuadorian embassy and so on. But what happened here was, under Obama, they chose not to indict him. They realised that they were looking at the Espionage Act and looking at it and thinking, actually, has a foreign national done any espionage here when someone has leaked things to them and it's in the public interest to share that? This guy's been a journalist. So Chelsea Manning, who was imprisoned for this under the Espionage Act, was the leaker of the information, and Julian Assange was the journalist in this case. Now, it's funny that just shortly before Khashoggi was murdered in Saudi Arabia, the USA and the CIA were planning an assassination attempt on Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, and because the policy had changed under Trump. And interestingly enough, Trump, who hated the press so much, actually seemed to not like the idea that the freedom of the press was being used against the US state. And Trump changed the policy and indicted Julian Assange. And this is when things really, really kicked off, because he really, as far as the Obama administration were concerned, they weren't really sure he had committed espionage. He's a foreign national, he can't really do that. He had done journalism. And then they did also say, if we do this to Julian Assange, do we have to do this to the New York Post? And that was their benchmark. And they said, well, yes, we do. So therefore, no, we can't do this to Julian Assange. We can't indict him. But Donald Trump did. Now, what they're calling for in the USA is for Biden to go back to that original decision and say this man is not this, because he's clearly in danger. Should we, as a nation, be thinking about sending someone to a nation that was considering assassinating him? This is a journalist. This is someone who told the truth. The people who did the crimes that he exposed don't seem, well, certainly very few of them seem to have suffered any justice whatsoever. Whereas this man, who hasn't done anything wrong other than tell the truth, regardless, everything else is white noise. The other arguments around whether he did any other crimes, we're not talking about that. That's not what he's being prosecuted for. That is not what's going on. And I think people really need to keep their eyes on the ball on this one. This is an attack on the freedom of the press. And this is someone saying, America saying, if you cross us, if you tell anyone about that, what's going to happen to you?
Yes, thank you. Stuart, what's your view on this?
This story's been going so long, and it's there's so much to it that it's very hard to keep track. And it feels like it's been going on as long as I've certainly been politically aware, perhaps. The bit that gets me is, has this come about because the political value of trying to keep this man safe has come to an end, that some leverage has moved somewhere else, that all the capital that we held by protecting this man's life has come to naught. And it certainly feels like there's other things going on in the background of this, beyond just a judicial system taking place.
I mean, for centuries, political refugees have come to England where they found safety. I mean, Karl Marx being one of the most prominent one. And it's sad that we seem to now be deciding that we're going to cooperate in this guy's demise. I mean, do you think, I would have said, if you're wanting to teach people a lesson about blowing the whistle, I think what's happened to him already is enough to deter anybody except with a strong stomach.
It's a difficult punishment that he's had already, certainly.
Yeah. Sam, I was amazed to find that he has a wife and children. I mean, it shows how little I knew about it before I started reading up. And his wife is an amazing person. Very often these people seem to find amazing spouses to fight their corner. Could you be married to him?
No. I mean, I probably could, because he's obviously amazing. I don't know. Being my husband is a full-time job, so I don't think I could have my husband in an embassy with a cat for a long time. No, he'd have to be here.
I think I'd find it a bit difficult to be married to Julian Assange, to tell you the truth. We wish him well, and I'm sure Jane would want you to write those letters and campaign. This is really an issue that sort of affects all of us, because at the end of the day, on a much smaller scale, there are times when we just have to tell people what's going on, and we can't have a world where as soon as you do that, your life is ruined. And now, thank you everybody for the big story. We move on. This is another great story, people. There are just so many things on those lists, and so often we just do the sort of normal pack, but this is one that came down from lower down the list, and I was just delighted because it's the announcement of all those firms who have cheated their lowest paid workers, and sort of, are we doing enough to help our lowest paid workers? I do feel, listener, that we're going to get a fairly unanimous voice from the team on this one, but sort of let's see what they have to say about it all. Stuart, you're the sort of one of our union wallers. Are we doing enough to help low paid workers?
I'm sure we as the five of us here are, but the government aren't. Clearly not. I mean, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the best that they could come up with was listing them in a name and shame kind of media extravaganza to convince these companies to pay the wages that they weren't paying. There was 203 companies found to have been paying workers below minimum wage, were charging them for things like uniforms, breaking the law time and time and time again. And the best that they could do was just a name and shame, slap on the wrist.
Do they have the power, Stuart, to do something to these people to these firms? I mean, can you actually fine them or something like that? Or is it just that's the only thing they can do now?
Well, I'm unsure if we do have the power, but I'm pretty sure the lawmakers in Westminster could come up with something, couldn't they, if they really had the political will to do so?
I mean, some of the things in that article just outraged me. I mean, the one is that in the last 6 years, we've managed to bring 6 companies to court for cheating their lowest paid workers, for failing to obey the law on the minimum wage. And the other one is that the minimum wage is only about £8.91, is it? I mean, how the hell? But the other thing was that when you did the sums and they sort of said, John Lewis cheated its workers, cheated 34,000 workers out of so many £1 million. It wasn't John Lewis. It was but sort of, you know what I mean? Read the article, people. It really is difficult reading. But it was very small amounts, Stuart, wasn't it? Sort of, it was £65 per. But these are people to whom £65 makes or breaks their life.
Certainly for minimum wage workers, for apprentices, for those on 0-hour contracts, for those that work quite short hours part-time, you're basically on the poverty level, you know, on those kinds of wages. And making a mistake, as some of these companies were putting it, charging them for things like uniforms, that puts people into poverty. That is, and certainly under the COVID restrictions, these are life and death situations in some cases, where people have been so desperate for money that, and there's such little help available to them that they've taken the baby in their arms and jumped off a tall building because they couldn't afford milk. These companies are taking advantage of the workers when there's absolutely no reason to do so. They can afford these amounts of money. These aren't small companies. These aren't little, start-up businesses trying to get by, or these are big national, big names that you would recognize on your high street, in, supermarkets, the big deals, and they're treating workers as if it's, how should I say, they're doing them a favor by letting people come to work for them. And it should be the other way around. Workers should know that you are selling your time to them. These companies should value you beyond belief.
Thank you. Sam, I mean, Stuart's right. These are companies for whom £65 is literally a tiny drop in the ocean. And yet, so have you any idea, Sam, why they are actually treating their workers, their lowest paid workers, in such a manner? Why are they doing it?
Well, because they can. I mean, a private company is legally obliged to make the most profit for its shareholders. Does not to make enough profit, to make the most profit that it can for its shareholders. And if that isn't growing year on year, then people ask questions. Even if you don't have to lose money, you just have to make less profit. And don't forget, profit isn't wages. Profit is the money after you've paid your wages, after you've paid all your overheads. It's the extra money that goes to the shareholders who have done nothing, right? So the thing that the fact is, right, over the last 10 years, we've closed 300 courts in this country. Justice doesn't exist for poor people. Legal aid doesn't exist in the way that it used to. So the question is, how are people supposed to defend themselves? If you say you won't work for a trial shift, then you don't get the job. If you say you won't pay for your uniform, then you're sacked. And if you want to take up with the company, you're going to have to pay money out of your pocket to get some legal redress. And obviously these people on the lowest possible wages this country, or less than the lowest possible wages this country allows, don't have the money to take things to court.
I mean, again, today I bought a box of chocolates from Hotel Chocolat and sent it to somebody we love very dearly. £58 for a box of chocolates. It was a very posh, it was a hamper of chocolates, but it was £58. And then I sent 2 bunches of those post-it flowers through when they post flowers through the letterbox to two people we love. £59. And money just pours through your fingers like water, particularly at Christmas. And these people are getting £8 an hour. And it just strikes me, does it not strike you, that there's an utter lack of realism in government about, I mean, these are people who happily put down sort of £35, £50 for a breakfast on expenses, and sort of, and yet will twist their faces when they're asked to put the living wage up to £15. We can't do that; it's impossible. And no concept of what money is. That was a statement, not a question, Sam. So thank you very much for it. So you set me off on one. Jane, what can we ordinary people do about this? What's the solution to this huge injustice?
It's not an easy one. On an individual level, there's not huge things we can do. Obviously, if you can afford to make choices about where you purchase things from, getting the reliable information on how those companies do treat their staff isn't an easy thing anyway. But there are various groups organised. I think they're at Organise HQ on Twitter. They do some fantastic campaigns. They did with Wetherspoons. They did the Make Mine a Double Tim campaign to get double pay for the staff on bank holidays recently, and they've done some good stuff with John Lewis staff too and Amazon staff. So there's things like that. But it really needs outside regulation. I think that all we can do is try and do our bit to campaign for that. But these big companies, the kind of money that they're looking at for profits, our voices are very little individually, and it really needs some big group action to compel them to do the right thing. I remember a few years ago hearing on the news, I don't know if it's Tesco's or Marks and Spencer's, they'd had only made so many £1 billion of profits, and they'd hoped to have made a few more £1 billion of profits. Now, for any of us, a few £1 billion of profits is absolutely crazy money. Anyone should be satisfied with that. But the way our markets are run now, the external forces say that actually they can go out of business. If they only make 50 billion and their shareholders wanted 60 billion, there'll be a run on the market and the whole company can collapse because of the greed of these external forces and the power they have. And then everyone will lose their jobs. So I don't even think it's as simple as, the people at the top of the company being greedy. I'm sure there is a lot of that as well. But even if they weren't, the external forces upon them, which are completely unregulated, have just created a ridiculous situation that's not sustainable.
Jane, that is such a good comment. People on the chat line, I want you to note that was a really and it's right. We've managed to create a capitalist society which is global, where the forces are unregulated and where they just can destroy whole countries. Never mind, and sort of they're just crushing people beneath their feet. I sort of, you're right as well. A lot of these campaigns, like the McDonald's workers had a campaign, didn't they? They're very local. Maybe the answer is for caring people to sort of watch what's going on in their local such and such, and get a local group about that, and then sort of perhaps if this is happening all over the country, maybe name and shame is a good idea, in as much as we need to get the names of these firms, and then we can withdraw our support. That'll get things changed. Thank you so much for that. Paul, the last word on this before we move on.
I'm going to go slightly tangential here. It's the system that's a problem here, and I'm going to use an example. When I was trying to find something out one time, because I was finding out whether PE teachers can sometimes claim a little bit of tax back because of if they have to buy their own clothes, if they buy their own uniforms and things like that. There's a thing where you have to do it, but I looked into it, and it turned out that it used to be that anyone could get money back for this kind of thing. But then they changed their mind, and it's now only people like solicitors who can get tax back. So they can buy an expensive suit, wear that for court, and they can get their tax back. Someone who is poorer than like a barrister or something like that can't do that, and the reason they give is they might wear it outside of work. What, a barrister won't, will they not? So a barrister gets in, changes into the suit when they're there. You know what I mean? It's this really, really weird system where everything, and I know it's a weird example, but that's like the kind of weird system we have where everything is based around everyone at the top. And I think it may have been Mark mentioned in the comments that, you know, this is state sponsored as well. Like, you know, when people are paid below minimum wage, the state is expected to pick up the slack. If they're paid too little to live on, the state picks up the slack. Well, therefore, it's a subsidy to that company that makes that huge profit. And it's a direct subsidy to them. You know, indirect, I suppose. It's an indirect subsidy. And people don't understand this. They think that people who are low paid are somehow at fault when they receive a form of social security. But the real people who are receiving the bailout are the people who should have been paying them properly anyway, because they're making enough. You know, it's not like we see Tesco or Asda going out of business every week, do we? You know, they're doing okay. So we need to change the system, and I would say we definitely need to unionise. The wins, we've had Lewis on the show before, who ran a lot of the McDonald's strikes and things through the Bakers Union, and yeah, that is one way to do it. But you've got to defend your reps, I would say, because they always come after the person who is brave enough to stand up.
Yes, and we might need to look into this in more depth, Paul, in some future. We'll bring people on who can talk about this, because unionisation in some of these areas is virtually impossible, I would have thought. Right, let's move on. Next question. Sam, that party, do you give a damn?
You know what? I haven't. This is one of those situations where, obviously, I want this government to fail, right? Because I don't want them to be in power, but I also don't want people to suffer. And there are times like this where you know, actually, your heart really does break, because you can feel how angry people are, and you know, because you lived through it, you know, at the time. A lot of us know people who lost people. A lot of us lost people. And to think that there were people who couldn't even hug each other at a funeral. And at that time, the people who made the rules that kept us apart, that many of us followed to the best of our ability, were just literally partying and literally laughing at us and laughing about it. I know I've never seen any kind of anger like this from anyone, to just switch on the radio, and I think it was probably Jeremy Vine, and just to hear a caller after caller after caller with heartbreaking stories talking about how angry they are. So yes, people do care. Actually, I was driving down the road today, and I went over a bridge, and across the bridge was graffitied, while people died, they partied, wake up, COVID-19 84. And that's literally the writing on the wall near Chester Street. Another thing I want to say, we're very good at feminism on this show. Like, Allegra Stratton resigned, okay. Why does Ed Oldfield still have a job? Everyone knows who he is. He was on that video too. I think most people think everybody at that party should not have a job anymore, but we know who he is. We've got video evidence of him laughing along with Allegra Stratton on that video about in the fake press conference about the party. Why does he still have a job? Get him out.
I found on Facebook a fair degree of support for Allegra Stratton, and certainly the feeling that she was just being picked on as a scapegoat because she was the woman and all the men were going scot-free.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm not saying that she's innocent, and I'm not saying that I've got an awful lot of sympathy for her, because I'm sure she'll fall upwards. I'm sure she'll fall into a much more well-paid job, and she'll be fine. But I do think she was scapegoated. I tell you what, if she's going to do that again, though, she's going to need some acting lessons, because nobody was believing those tears.
Thank you. Paul, what people are saying, you ran a fabulous thread on Facebook, which basically invited people to say things that were worse than the party. It's sort of Labour List was saying that this has been a kind of a watershed moment where actually it has done Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party a huge amount of harm. All those other things that were listed on that thread, people sort of shrugged their shoulders and moved on. Do you think that this has hit home to people, and in a way, should it have done?
I think it's had some cut through. That's definitely the case, but I'm not sure whether I like a politics where this has more cut through than the awful things that they do. Like, you know, we know, I suppose it's just that people maybe didn't believe that they were that hypocritical. Like, it came as no surprise to most people I spoke to. No one, like, everyone thought that they were doing this the entire time. What worries me is journalists sat on it for a year. You know, they could have released this at any time. And I'm wondering why. I think this is a bit of a dead cat again, because we've got, this Johnson's done some awful things this week. So we've got the police and crime bill. We've got the immigration and borders bill, was it called? We've got these awful things that they voted on, and yet we're all talking about this party. And I think eventually, like, you know, you'll find out that people might forget about this kind of thing. And then, of course, they released it at a time where Boris Johnson's wife was about to give birth, and then maybe there's a bit of sympathy there. And then they do the whole... So I want people not to think about this stupid party. We know they were doing these things. What they probably should have said, I wouldn't have even minded if they'd have said at the time, do you know what? These people work together all day, every day. That's not that bad. They're in the same room together all the time. If they'd have said to my colleagues, you can have a Christmas party together in your work building, we'll allow you to do that, then honestly, these things, I think they had a stressful time. They were in contact with each other. They were probably at no greater risk of COVID than anyone else. I don't think it's as huge an issue as all that. But what I do think is a huge issue is when, like, I'll read a few from the thread. I've had, like, Sarah Francis saying, trying to get away with starving vulnerable kids during the summer holidays. Pretty shitty behaviour. I've said banging untreated sewage into the rivers and the sea. Lots of things from Priti Patel. Trying to give our foreign aid budget to Israel's military. That was quite bad. When Gavin Williamson did a treason, allegedly, and Theresa May sacked him. Theresa May, like her reaction to Grenfell, all the things that led up to that, like all that profiteering that led up to those people burning in the homes. These are the things that we should be furious about. The stuff they've done to disabled people, personal independence payments, assessments, all that kind of really dark, disgusting behaviour, the way they've treated their own people. Get angry about that. Don't get angry about Christmas parties that a few of their employees had, because really, that's a side issue. Their moral fibre is judged on what they have actually done and what they vote for day in, day out. Judge them on that and be furious.
Thank you, Paul. Insightful. Jane, do you think this is the end of Boris? And because it's looking like it looks like Koonsberg's decided he's got to go. And if so, what do you think of the possibility of Priti Patel taking over from him?
That's horrendous. I don't know. I'd like to think this was the end of Boris, but for me, he overstepped the line before he even became Prime Minister. He'd done disgusting things that he should have not even had a political career for doing, and I can't believe the things he's done over the last 2 years. So I don't know what it takes for people to stop looking at him as some sort of blonde, tussle-haired clown, and it's okay, he's doing his best apparently. I don't know, but the thought of Priti Patel, I think she might even be worse than Boris. She's the things she's done are absolutely disgusting, and that the recent Nationality and Borders bill, absolutely disgusting. The promo shots of her in a police uniform, or is it the bulletproof vest, ugh, they just sicken me. Everything she stands for sickens me, to be honest.
Me too. And finally, Stuart, round it up. As this, I mean, it's an awful moment in British politics, but do you think it's a watershed moment? Sort of, or is it, as Jane suggested, just going to get worse?
I think it's perhaps exposed in the simplest terms the kind of deficit of integrity and honesty and poor judgment that this government has been delivering for the last decade.
Yeah, spot on. Thank you. I'm going to, this is Christmas, everybody. I'm going to take one last question. We have 1 minute left. I'm going to overrun Paul by a little while, but I'm not going to allow you to talk very long. And I'm just going to just ask you to complete this question, this sentence for me. The most important thing about Christmas is, and people on the chat line have been watching you, thank you for your comments today, but sort of the most important thing about Christmas is, perhaps you can tell us, and perhaps Sam will be able to pick up some of your comments in the second half of the show, but let's just go around. The most important thing about Christmas, the thing that makes Christmas Christmas, not what you want for Christmas, but the essence of what makes Christmas. Paul.
Kindness.
Jane.
Making time for the people you care about.
Stuart.
Knowing that your people are safe.
God bless you. Sam.
Doctor Who Christmas special. New Year special. I'm being corrected. It's all one season, right?
Yes.
John, what's yours?
Christ. I think we've lost the Christ after Christmas, and I think that explains an awful lot about how the government's behaving. I think it explains an awful lot about the way we treat each other in politics and on social media. I think there's a huge loss there. Right, everybody, why we don't have more people watching this program astounds me. I have just been thrilled to listen to the team today. Are they not fantastic? Sit at home and give them a clap, sort of a little clap. And thank you, team. You've been unbelievable. Now, what's going to happen, as you know, we're going to listen to a song, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to try and keep my mouth shut, Sam. And Sam will be in charge, and she'll be looking at, I noticed that Jake Ratcliffe asked a question that was worth picking up. Did you notice that, Sam, about the showing of the Labour candidate in a by-election, 12%, should he be stood down and replaced?
Yeah, we'll do that.
And so that something we might want to address. And some of the things, Sam's in charge of that bit. I don't know why I'm speaking. And so if you have to go, have the most blessed Christmas, you and your family and those you love, and we will be back in the new year with all the wisdom of the dream team, and thank you very much indeed. If you can stay with us for the second half, for the graveyard shift, you're very welcome. We rely on those a bit of a stream coming through to fuel that. God bless you. Thank you, team, and to some of you, goodbye. Have a great Christmas. See the rest of you in 5 minutes' time. Bye bye.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say. And around here we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong. For the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone. For I'm here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, it is me. I am in charge. um, there have been some lovely, lovely comments about what makes Christmas Christmas. Lots of Christian socialism in the comments. We really like to read that. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Barbara says, "Do unto others." You hearing a beep from me? Don't worry, I'll sort it. Barbara says, "Do unto others as we would have do to us," with the words of Jesus. Lovely. Mark points out that that has it was the season of Yule, and that there's a bit of controversy, but he's a Christian, he's with you, and I'm with you too. We do need a bit of light at this time of year. It's fine that Jesus wasn't actually born in December. It's okay.
Probably didn't look like Thor either.
Neil tries to make one of his typical dad jokes. Well done, Neil. Neil also dropped a link to ACAS. If any of you are experiencing an employer not paying you the minimum wage, Google ACAS, Google their advice. I'm going to have to hand it over to one of you guys to carry on because my speakers are running out of battery and I need to go and plug them in. Oh no, carry on. Maybe talk about the Lib Dem thing that John was talking about.
Do you want me to go? I'll do it. It's like Socialist Night Live, which was back on Saturday as well. It was quite good actually with the RMT. Did anyone see it? Obviously Jane saw because she was on with me, but yeah. She had to see it. It was really, really good. We had Steve Headley on from the RMT and Cat Cray, and yeah, really, really good. And it was nice to hear some positivity because I don't think we hear enough about people winning. So check that one out if you can. And I know like some people who are watching sometimes want us to not focus so much on the Labour Party and want to focus on the Labour movement. It definitely did that. So we are on Jake, who was saying that it was a certain percentage, wasn't it? Let me see. It's gone quite far back here. I can't find it. Oh, it said that the Tories are on 40% in, is it Shropshire?
I think it was Shropshire, and I think that the Labour guy, I can remember that the Labour guy was on 12.
Yeah, Labour on 12, Lib Dems on 39, he said, and should Labour stand down? My personal opinion on that one is like it would massively depend on a candidate. I would never look what the Lib Dems did during the coalition. Look what Labour did during the Iraq War. You know, these things are not that simple. Obviously, I'm a Labour Party supporter and a member, and I want the Labour Party to be in power, but I want them to be in power and actually changing things for the good and doing a socialist agenda. So, I don't know. I want to say the Tories lose as well, but what? I don't want a Pyrrhic victory.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to have a chunter here because there's more and more talk about a progressive alliance, and particularly as we realise that Labour just will not be able to win an election for the foreseeable future. The right are chucking out the left. They're losing all their activists. They're losing all their income. And I can't see that they've lost Scotland. I can't see Labour being in a position to form a government. Do you not think, Paul, that there is a real case, and with Wales, which is a brilliant place, seeming to drive the way forward, of some kind of a progressive alliance, some kind of electoral pact, which will get rid of this dreadful right-wing Tory government and put, in much like you get in places like Germany, a broad left-wing coalition into power that can at least change the direction of politics in the country.
Depends what you mean by left-wing, doesn't it? I don't see the Lib Dems as being approaching left-wing. They are liberal in some of the views. They vote for some progressive values, such as equality on being like LGBT rights, etc. But where are they economically? They're not left wing economically in the slightest, and the Labour Party aren't left in wing in the slightest in its current incarnation. They are not to the left of the centre. They are pro capitalism, pro neoliberalism, really. So, what's a progressive alliance mean? Are you talking about changing things? Are you talking about the only thing to do that? The only reason really to do that would be to get some sort of proportional representation in, I guess. But I'm not really seeing any mainstream political arguments that match my economic view at all at a time when we really, really, really need an alternative economic view. So a progressive alliance probably isn't what it claims to be.
Yeah, it is tricky, isn't it, to work out what's best, but that's. I just feel strongly that democracy, if what we've got is not a perfect system, but it is what we've got, and it is what people are used to in terms of democratic engagement, and removing options from people to vote for doesn't feel very democratic to me. I would like Labour to stand everywhere that an election is being fought, and that, because there are places that maybe we don't stand because we feel like we're never going to win, but you never get the start, then you never get people getting in the habit of voting Labour, and you're definitely never going to win if you don't stand. At this point, one more person in the blue corner, one more person in the red corner, one more person in the yellow corner isn't going to change the country, because the Conservatives got such a huge majority in Westminster. But I think when you start talking about standing down candidates like that, it starts to sound a lot like sort of winning at all costs, or I don't know. What do you think, Stuart?
I have very strong feelings on Lib Dems. Obviously, in that by-election, at the start of the by-election, the Lib Dem leaflets, how should I say? I don't want to call them liars, but they overstated the actual truth with regards to figures, and I think they play on that. They use that as a electoral how should I say, ploy. Nationally, we've seen it before in other areas, but I think if you're talking about a progressive alliance, if the Labour Party in its membership are the most progressive group of people in Britain right now, what we do by aligning with these people, we aren't creating a progressive alliance that way. What we're doing is diluting a progressive alliance. We are weakening what we're doing. The Lib Dems aren't coming to us to make an approach to say, here's an electoral route to take. They are asking us to give up our electoral route, and that is one, I think, against everything the membership stands for. It's the same for the SNP, and historically, I'm a disabled person. I look at the Lib Dems, and what I see are the people who got into bed with the devil. They saw, nice Nick Clegg, he'll do us right, and then he sold us down the river. People like me, students, people on benefits, people who were on social security, needed help. We were sold down the river for their electoral success, and that's something that I'll never forgive. So, if the Labour Party I want to get into bed with the Lib Dems, that's not something that I'd be comfortable with, because that's selling me down the river from inside my own party.
Thanks, Stuart. Jane, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I did actually. I have a real bee in my bonnet about the number of people who don't vote in this country. And not that I'm angry with them, but I just feel what's the percentage that are likely to vote at this election we're talking about now? Maybe 60%. I've seen a lot lower percentages near me. So that's maybe 30-40% of the constituents aren't going to vote. And those are the people that Labour needs to go and speak to them and find out what they want and try to represent them. And I know that's not easy. I know it's not. But my feeling is very strongly that a lot of those people are the very people that most need a Labour government and that Labour should be representing. And I really think it really bothers me that we have this narrow, 50% of the population are voting and it's all about them. And we just dismiss the 50% or however many that aren't, because they have needs as well, but they've lost hope in the system, and it's really wrong that they're not represented, and they should be. So I don't think Labour should stand down at that by-election. I think that Labour should get out and speak to the people who aren't going to vote and try to convince them to vote for them, offer them something to make their lives better.
Do you know those apps that you get as well? The ones that say, oh, this is like, they've tried to do these Progressive Alliance apps in the past where it is, oh, in your ward, your most likely person is. And the Lib Dems made a load of them. And it was like telling people to vote Lib Dem in Labour wards, in like Labour strongholds. So they weren't really trying to do a Progressive Alliance. They were trying to use it as a tool to get more than like 10 seats or whatever they get now. So, yeah, interesting as well what Carl was saying. He says there's no electoral route. The maths say no one but the Tories can win without a coalition, and the centre-right are not convincing. It's interesting because people see those voters, like Jane said, the people who vote, they're the ones who matter, and the people who vote, the majority of them are voting Tory. So therefore, the political centre ground is the Tory party, when really a lot of people want an alternative. And the people who Jane's talking about who aren't voting, they actually do want an alternative, and there isn't one there. And we saw that, like at the referendum, there were people who would never voted before because they wanted change. They were trying to vote for a change, and it was completely misread by the country as being something else. Or and in 2017 we saw a lot of people vote, and if Labour had just held their young people and got the younger people coming through in the same sort of percentages, they'd be well in the lead by now, comfortably in the lead. But that is not the direction at the moment.
I think it's hard as well when you're talking about voters. We look back over the last 20-30 years at the kind of patterns that we had, and it's completely different now. The voter base is so volatile that it swings so wildly week to week, the ups and downs. So things happen so much quicker now that if you're doing the maths based on 2005 or worse, going back to the mid-90s, and you're still using those kind of systems, it's completely out of date. And we need to find ways to assess when things will be useful, when we deploy information, how we campaign, what we do. That needs to be timed better to this more, volatile politics that we have.
I think that's a really good point. We can't assume, like, post Brexit, politics is different. Post the 2015, I think people started to engage with politics in a really different way, and maybe not a better way, but people's opinions change so quickly now. Really extreme swings from one way to another. So I don't think anybody anywhere should ever be using the word safe seat in a confident way. I don't think there's anything like a safe seat anymore. And I think you're right. We've got to see what actually happens rather than polls, which may be misguided. Just to say, the turnout for the Old Bexley and Sidcup by-election was 34%. So I just looked that up just then. By-elections always have poor turnout, but yeah, I mean that's the type of engagement we're looking at. It's such a shame, isn't it? that people aren't going to actually vote. But then that's a whole
Chris has
nother
asked what a
program.
progressive alliance is. Maybe we're talking where we need to.
Does anybody want to? I don't believe progressive alliances exist, so if anybody wants to take that one.
This sounds like a Paul thing. Paul's very
Okay.
skilled at breaking this down.
A progressive alliance is supposed to be when parties that are of the general left get together and basically stand candidates down. So if Labour and the Lib Dems vote were adding up to like 54%, you go, well, actually, all the Lib Dems will step down because Labour's higher that one. And then they would say to their voters, vote for the Labour Party because they're our best chance, and vice versa. But like, what we're arguing is that actually that doesn't really exist because there's not really much progressive politics at the moment. So yeah, it's meant to be. It's basically a big anti-Tory thing, isn't it? Because people want rid of the Tories, because the Tories, if they get 40% of the vote, they're in this country. They will have a big majority with 40% of the vote in the UK. And I know we've got like international listeners as well. So more than half of the population can be very unhappy with the ruling party, and that ruling party could have the most comfortable of comfortable majorities. So the idea of a progressive alliance would be to try to stop that by only having one anti-Tory party.
I think the word progressive has been devalued hugely. Sort of, I mean, and the left is regarded as retrogressive, isn't it? Now that we want to go back to the 19th century, and progressive people, progressive politicians, they want to power on into this new capitalist future. I mean, I'm just against progressive politicians altogether at the moment.
Kath and Tim point out that in Ferry Hill, a parish by-election got 17% turnout, and Aycliffe, what's it called?
Big Trump, that 13%.
13%.
Beat you on the apathy.
Once you get to smaller, so obviously parliamentary, unitary or borough council, and then parish council, weirdly, the more local it gets, the more disengaged people are, which is such a shame, because actually the more local a councillor is, the more they've got less power to change the law, but they do have the power to do the things that most people care about, like sort out the dog poo and the fly tippering and the littering. And active councillors definitely do make an impact on those things, because they're the ones that follow the officers around and report things relentlessly and get things sorted. So yes, make sure you vote for your local councillor. That's all I'm saying. Everyone's got to start somewhere.
Did you say Carl's saying progressive has mostly been claimed by the centrists? And I think like you can see that where Labour Party had a faction before, like factions became a negative thing. The centrists had a faction called Progress, which was interestingly enough more conservative than the rest of the Labour Party. But they called themselves Progress because it sounds good. So yeah, so progressive can be associated with that as well. That was like the whole idea behind when the Labour Party used purple. That's the colours of progress, and it's a little wink, like, here you go, we are of that element of the party. So yeah, that's
right.
progress.
It's time for the Neil Terry comedy show. I've got 2 Neil Terry jokes. Brace yourself. Okay. When John was talking about buying a box of chocolates for £50 from Hotel Chocolat, Neil said, "I would want a room in Hotel Chocolat for that price." Which is true. I would.
I knew you'd have to do better than that to get me laughing. Carry on. Is the second one any better?
Well, the second one is when we were talking about profits and shareholders and companies not paying their staff properly. He said HMRC equals helping millionaires ruin countries.
Well,
That's
is
good.
I hope you appreciate my delivery there, Neil. There have been a couple of comments for you, John. Tim Dredge started off early doors by saying big thanks to John Declare for his service on Great Aycliffe Town Council. I understand he's very recently stepped down, a huge advocate for the town, a great servant. And you got a note from Chris Hood as well. Chris says, I read before that John has stepped down at Great Aycliffe Town Council. I'd like to tip my hat to his service. Well done, John, and thank you for your service. How long have you been a local councillor, John?
I became a Great Aycliffe Town Councillor in 1995. So that's more than 25 years. Thank you to those people. For health reasons, we've decided that we need to move Barbara's health, my wife's health. We need to move closer to family. And so I've stepped down from the town council. The house is up for sale and we're off to Sheffield.
Ooh.
So that'll be a big change in our lives, but necessary. And I would have gone on at Great Aycliffe Town Council for a bit longer until we actually move. But another chap in my ward, the councillor, sadly died. So there was going to be a by-election. And the by-election cost the town council £11,000. And you know, when you're that's a big chunk out of a parish council's budget. And so to save the electors having two by-elections, 1 month after the other, and to save them having to spend £22,000, I said I would retire early and go. And so that's me. I went to a meeting and asked a public question, and everybody was calling me councillor. I've been a councillor for so long that it became part of my being, Chris Hood, and sort of, it's a bit of a weird world, but onward and upwards into a new chapter of life. Thank you for your kind words. And other people's jobs now, yours, Chris, to tell you the truth. Sam, Stuart, sort of got to press on now and make it a good one. And just before I finish, Sam, the public question I raised as a member of the public was to do with climate change, and that message must not be lost. We have to keep banging that drum. It overwhelms any other question that we've got, because there's no point in sort of campaigning about stop and search in a world where society has collapsed because of the pressures. It couldn't cope with the pressures of climate change. And we need to mitigate it, and we need to adapt to the changes that's going to happen as well. So please, Sam, please, Stuart, make sure that you drive through on that issue. Chris Hood, it's down to you. You are the people who picked up the cloak, and now you must run with those issues. But thanks for saying nice things about me. It's been an absolute blast. It's the greatest thing in the world to be. It's the greatest honour. It trumps being an MBE or a knighthood or anything else when your local people say, you are the people we want to represent us in all these areas. We want you to be our representative. It's not a thing for pride, it's a thing for absolute terror, because it's your job to do that job properly. And hung up me councillorship. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Durham County Council are currently working out whether we are going to call an ecological emergency on top of the climate emergency that we called when you were in office a couple of years ago. Part of that work. So that's quite good. I mean, spoiler alert, it looks like yes. Yeah, you were the climate champion for Durham County Council. Did we replace you or not? I don't know.
I don't think you've got a formal replacement, but Mark Wilkes has taken over. Mark Wilkes stepped directly into my shoes, but they are just sort of part of his shoes. As you know, Mark Wilkes is the Environment Cabinet Minister. So he's got sort of all those things such as salting the roads in winter and cutting the grass and bin collections. That's all under his, and climate change comes under that. I must say this about Mark Wilkes, even though he's a Lib Dem, he is mightily committed to climate change. And you must do a Keir Starmer and support him on that, Sam. Threaten to withhold your vote unless he does something. He's trying to pick up the pace, and all good. Well done to him on that as well.
Awesome. Do I have any other comments? When we're talking about bad bosses and people not getting paid properly, Neil did make the good point that, you know, it could very much get worse because you don't have access to. If you don't have access to justice through the legal route, what else might you do? Well, you might protest, but under the policing bill, that could land you in prison for up to 10 years. And if you don't have ID, they're making it so you won't be able to vote the government out. So these are the things that we should all very much be concerned about. And
Can I just say this, Sam? ID is a big issue. ID is a big issue because not everybody can afford a passport, and many people don't have a passport, and many people don't have a driving license. And and I found out today that if you go on and try and do anything on the HMRC website, they sort of say we need proof of your identity before we can proceed. And the options of proving your identity, one of them is a Northern Ireland driving license. The other one is evidence against about your account. And the question is, how much did you pay last year? And if you paid zero tax last year, it won't accept the no, we need a sum. How much did you pay last year? £0. No. You can with that. We don't accept that. You know, nothing. Or a passport. And sort of at the end of the day, there's so many people who are not going to be able to pick up on their civil rights simply because they cannot prove their identity. It's a big issue.
It is a big issue.
I said I wasn't going to talk. I've talked all the time.
Okay. I'm going to give the last word of the show to Laura, who talked to us via Twitch. She also got told off by the Twitch robot for putting too many heart emojis on early on in the show. That made me laugh. But when we were talking about that party and whether the other things that have been going on are dead cats or not. A dead cat is something you do to distract people from the terrible political truth, just in case anybody out there is confused about that. She said, yes, it may be a dead cat, but the fact is that most people are far too focused on surviving and keeping afloat over Tory austerity that they feel hurt by the double standard when people who haven't been able to say goodbye to dying relatives while they party. No question this cuts through. Yes, they've done worse, but let's hang on to anything that people are upset about. And I think it's just a really strong, not just people are upset about it, so let's make the most of it. I didn't say that. That's not what I'm saying. But people need to know that we're listening to them, and what matters to them matters to us. So that's where I am on that. Anyway, we are going to wind up so that our wonderful panel members and you, dear listener, can get some sleep because it is late. Remember, we are going to be taking a holiday for Christmas. This is the last one for Christmas, isn't it? Yes, we're going to take a couple of weeks off for Christmas. But don't worry, because there is a plethora of content that you can catch up on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook. Just search Socialist Think Tank. And if you want to, you can become a member. It is free, and we won't charge you anything unless you don't want us to. But if you do want us to, thank you, because it does cost money to do some things, even though none of us get paid here. That's still not happening. One day I might get a free hoodie. Keep dropping hints, but nobody's
Have to order some
yet.
first. Yeah, we're out.
And we're also on your favorite podcast app, whatever podcast app you use, whether it's Overcast, Spotify, the others. Just search Socialist Think Tank, and there's loads of stuff on there. Really, Paul and Laura and the other people who do Socialist Think Tank have been churning out amazing content all year. So thank you very much for that. Is there anything you'd like to announce, Paul? Anything else coming up?
No, we'll look out for some surprises though, because I'm sure we'll have a few. And and there was a question in there about whether John is remaining as part of this show. I think you can alleviate some panic there, can't you, John?
Sort of. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk a little bit more. I get worried, people, because these people are so young and so in touch and so knowledgeable. And I'm an old person, and I worry terribly about being yesterday's man. And really, and the more I drop out of things, the less current I become. So I worry about this. But at the moment, it's just a privilege to sit here and ask these people questions, and then they tell me stuff. And so I just love doing this show, and sort of being the foil that allows them to share their knowledge with you, listener. And as long as that's seen to be a positive, I'd love to continue it. And Paul is on an order that when I become a silly old man, he just needs to say, and I'll go gracefully. God bless you all. Yeah, but we'll see you after the new year. And for the moment, what a joy it is to just sit here in this chair and listen to these people talking. God bless them.
Okay, that's us. Good night.
Keep the red flag flying here.